which is modern Turkey. For much of the past 80 years, Turkey was a NATO ally, a friend of Israel, a friend of the United States, and of the European Union. But all of a sudden, folks, just out of the clear blue sky, in the last few years, the Turkish government has swung dramatically away from the West and have now become friends and allies of Russia and Iran, just as the Bible said would happen in the very last days. Okay? Added to the list in chapter 38 is Ethiopia. The Hebrew word is Cush, which is the area of the Upper Nile region, what we now call modern Sudan. Obviously, Sudan is radical Islam. They have become very good friends with Iran, very good friends with Russia, and they have become very outspoken against Israel. Once again, just developed in the last handful of years. Then, the attack will involve one other area called Put. Now, Put, if you have heard of the guy named Josephus, you know that he was a famous Jewish historian. He tells us where this area is. You can look at the map there. It is the area, what is now known, the North African territory of Libya, Algeria, and Tunisia. It is no coincidence that the Libyan government has gone the way they have. What has happened just in the last couple months, this was all talked about in the Scripture. And what's going on here is quite interesting because in 2008, the president of Russia made history. And, you know, back in 2008, people weren't even thinking about this stuff. We're talking 4 years ago. But Putin became the first Russian leader to visit Libya in all history. He goes there to sign a $2.5 billion arms agreement for one of the most vivid haters of Israel. Now, isn't this odd that these nations are all coming together exactly as Ezekiel would say would take place in the latter days? We're just talking in the last handful of years, the last 4 years. Are you all listening to me? What are the chances of this happening? And I want you to consider this, folks. It's nothing short of amazing that over 2,500 years ago, Ezekiel gave the exact list of the nations that will move against Israel in the last days. Each of these nations are now, for the first time in history, are now in place. So, 36 and 37 has to happen before 38 and 39 happen. 36 and 37 is now history. Guess what? 38 is literally coming to pass right before our eyes. Which tells us, folks, we're at a very interesting place. If this war, and I think this is true, if this war takes place at the beginning of the tribulation, then the only thing that would keep this from happening would be the rapture. We're the restrainers that are holding it back. But let me tell you what happens in this war. This war changes a lot of things. Because what ends up happening is the Lord has to move to protect Israel. As a result, God uses some natural disasters such as an earthquake and hail and all the type of thing. Plus, there's going to be confusion in the camp. They'll start turning on one another. The armies will begin to fight one another as they did several times, even in the Old Testament. In the end, 84% of the enemy is destroyed. Here is little tiny Israel with nobody defending it and 84% of the enemy. That is probably one of the worst battle results in history. 5/6 of the armies are destroyed. Now, this opens up a very, very interesting question. And here's where I really want you to listen to me. the question remains, where is the United States during this war? And why doesn't America come to help Israel in this war? Now, folks, you cannot get away from the fact that nobody comes to Israel's aid. God has to intervene, which makes some very scary thoughts about Israel's friend. Now, let me just say to you, not only that is alarming, but the fact is, Israel has nobody to rescue, nobody to fight for them. But if you look at this deep enough, you'll find out, folks, you really, really can't find America in prophecy. Now, there are people who talk about the little isle nations, the nations far off, the young eagle nations or the lion nations. If you were to take those verses to apply them to to America, which you can't if you're going to be biblically accurate, but even if you did, let's give you the benefit that it's talking. The young lions is talking about America. Even those nations, every one of them are destroyed. So that's not good. But honestly, you can't find America in prophecy. Why? Well, I've come up with what I think, and I've tried to think this through real deeply, I've come up with what I think are three only answers. There's only three answers of why the Bible is silent about America. Okay? Listen to me. Number one, the only one of the three is God didn't know that America was going to be here. So therefore, He doesn't say anything about us. Now, I'm glad you're laughing because that is stupid to believe that. Okay? So that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I mean, that would be a logical answer. I mean, okay, He didn't know it was going to happen. He didn't know it was going to be. Okay, number two, and this one is interesting, America becomes so insignificant and powerless during the last days that it has no real influence on the world. Now, that's not quite as funny, is it? Because that sounds a little more potentially possible. Now, let me just tell you something, folks. We're in the second month of the year. We're only a few months away from a major election. I don't know how you personally feel about it, but I agree with President Obama that if in the third year he couldn't get us out of the economy situation, then he needs to be a one-term president. But I wouldn't be surprised, because we've seen this happen before, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get him back in the office. That would be, you don't get mad at me, I'm not going to be a politician here, but I'm not very excited about that thought. But let me just tell you something. Our economy is falling apart. If we can make it through the end of the year and we go into the next year, who knows how much further. You got to understand, God's going to eventually catch up to all these millions of babies that we've killed. But let's just put together a little scenario here. Let's say that 2012, the rapture takes place. And all of a sudden, all the believers in America, the salt of the earth, the light of the world that's represented in our country is gone. You want to talk about mass pandemonium. But I got news for you, brother. Once we're out of here, there's no reason why God would have to hold back His hand of judgment.
That's right.
So, which brings me to the third possible, the reason the Bible is silent about America is because America simply does not exist in the last days.